The diabolical nature of mercury is that when you get it into your body and you're not excreting it fast, and some people are fast excretors, others are not, and it has to do with methylation as well as the production of glutathione in the body. What happens, where does it get stored? Well, it gets stored in the kidney and liver, which are the two organs responsible for getting rid of mercury. Now, once it starts damaging those organs, well, then you have problems dumping the rest of the toxins that you're continually taking in.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 143, Dr. Bill McGraw on Mercury Toxicity and How to Detox from Mercury, Part 1. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power, so tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vidal Speaks podcast. In case you're new, I'm Deborah Vidal and welcome. I hope all of you are well and you're surviving these crazy times. I told you I'd be back soon and you wouldn't have to wait so long for another episode. And this one's a killer today because it's one of the most searched subjects on the internet, and that subject is mercury toxicity. This subject is so key because we all have mercury toxicity, but there are many people suffering from unknown mercury toxicity because it can mimic so many other causes. And then there are those people that know they're sick from mercury, but they have no idea how to get it out, or else they try and they become more sick. I've received a few emails from people like this. It's so sad. It really breaks my heart. And as you guys know, detox is my specialty because I got so sick from the pesticides on the golf courses when I played them weekly as a pro golfer on the LPGA Tour. And I was sick with chronic sinus infections and I just couldn't get better. Even a sinus surgery to remove a polyp didn't help when they told me that was the whole problem. But the infections just kept coming. And when you're sick from toxicities, doctors have no clue how to help you, and they can't even diagnose you or tell you what's causing all these symptoms. So you just end up falling through the cracks of the healthcare system, and you end up desperately searching for your own cure. I've been there, believe me and trust me, but that's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So this is a show that's dedicated to all of you out there that are not well, or ones that are wondering if you may be suffering from mercury toxicity. The main person that helped hundreds of people detox from mercury was Dr. Andrew Cutler. He did 2 episodes on my podcast, and still today, those 2 episodes are the most viewed. That shows you how many people are either sick from mercury poisoning or think they are and are looking for help. And sadly, Dr. Cutler died shortly after our interview, and nobody has filled his shoes quite the same. But my guest today, Dr. Bill, he's stepping into his shoes, so you guys want to listen up. And like most who get in the healing business, they get there because they too were sick and they got well, and then they decide to help people and they start dedicating their life to showing people and others how to do it. Thank God for people like Dr. Bill, because he gives people hope that they too can get well. And maybe Dr. Cutler will be smiling over our shoulder today, happy that we're still telling people how they can get well from mercury toxicity. In our interview today, you're going to hear Dr. Bill's story, and then he goes into how we're all exposed to mercury and what symptoms it causes, and finally, what you can do to heal from it. So you may want to listen to this one a few times. I love this kind of podcast. Kind of bad news, but with a good news solution. That's the thing I love about Dr. Bill. He's really giving you a much easier solution than the one that Dr. Cutler had, because there's a lot more years of research now that have gone by. So that's what I mean about the good news solution. There's simple things that you can do and take that will really, really help you. By the way, you guys, before I tell you a little bit about Dr. Bill, I just want to remind you that if you're a subscriber to this channel, Vidal Speaks, then please also subscribe to my Soul Canyon Kitchen Wisdom channel, because I do a lot of great health videos over there too, of course, along with the cooking videos. But I just want to let you know that you have to subscribe to both channels, okay? Some of you are subscribing here and don't know that I have the other channel, and vice versa. So I just want to remind you to subscribe to both channels and hit that notification button so that you can learn when I post a new video on each one. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Bill. Dr. Bill is originally from the United States, but he's lived and worked in 4 other countries for a total of 19 years, including Panama, where he currently resides with his Panamanian wife. He has 3 degrees, 3 different majors from 3 different universities, including a PhD in aquaculture. Dr. Bill writes and publishes research articles in scientific journals and websites, while periodically teaching an online class called Basics of Aquaculture. His current passion is healing people from chronic disease using the Rife technology, heavy metal detox, and diet and lifestyle changes. During the last 3 years, he has published 2 books on heavy metals. Both are available on Amazon, and you'll see the links below. Dr. Bill hopes to finish a degree in naturopathic medicine as soon as time and travel allows. In the meantime, he will continue his passion for research and publishing in the fields of health, agriculture, coral reefs, and GMOs. So I think you can see why I'm excited to have Dr. Bill on my show as a guest, because it's all about detox. All right, you guys, so sit back and relax, but not too much, and put those listening ears on, because this is one you got to pay attention, and he's going to do a lot of talking, so listen up. All right, here we go. Hey, Dr. Bill, welcome to the Vidal Speaks podcast. I look forward to talking to you today all about Mercury. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You know, one of my most favorite subjects, because it's something that's so widespread in the world, and half the time people have no idea that they're sick from mercury, actually, and they just think they're getting older or they have some strange phenomenon. But you're here to tell us your story. And like most people, like myself, I became a homeopath because I was sick. And I'm sure you became the mercury expert because you got sick. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. Yes, it is.
So I would like to always start by first tell us a little bit about who you are, and then tell me your story. I want people to know what you do, what your qualifications are, and then I want to know your story.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I started off pre-med in undergrad in Pennsylvania at a pretty prominent university. I switched over to regular science. I went on to graduate with 3 degrees, 3 different majors, 3 different universities. And really they were in basic science and biology and aquaculture. And I went around and traveled the world, lived and worked in 5 countries, and the last one before this one, where I live now in Panama for 11 years, was South Africa. And that's basically where my story starts. Before going to South Africa, I had to go for a checkup and all that, and they wanted to give me vaccines. And at the time, I really didn't know enough about adjuvants and how dangerous they were. And so I told them, look, give me whatever you think I need, and I want to be protected. I want to go over there and get sick. So they gave me about 12 vaccines all at once. And then I went over. So about a year and a half, 2 years later, working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, was a pretty intense project in aquaculture in South Africa. And I was under a super amount of stress, and I started developing insomnia. And so after a while, I went to a doctor, and sure enough, he gave me a prescription drug. I think the name of it was Stilnox. And it was a pretty heavy-duty tranquilizer, and it absolutely put me out. And I was thankful for it at that time to be whacked and be able to sleep 8 hours because I hadn't been able to, and I was working a lot. But if I took too much of it, it would really bamboozle me the next day. So I wasn't keen on doing that for the rest of my life. Well, months after that, the drug wore off, stopped working, and I needed a new drug. Well, I moved to Panama to start another aquaculture project, and I still suffered from insomnia. So I went to 10 different doctors over the next, 7 years, and including a naturopath, and they kept giving me more drugs, and I took them, and most of them didn't work. And I'd come back and say, look, this drug doesn't work, and they give me another drug. And over time, I really got sick of it. None of these things worked for me. I developed anxiety, where I'd sleep about 3-4 hours. I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with anxiety, and blood pressure was 210/120, and I'd go back to the doctor. And one of these MDs just looked at me and said, look, I don't have any more drugs. Take this. It was like a benzodiazepine. You need to take this whenever you have problems, because at that time I was heavy into anxiety, which was really ruining my work. And he just looked at me and said, I don't want to ever see you again. I don't have anything else to give you. So my last shot was to go to a naturopathic doctor here in Boquete, Panama. And, he hooked me up to a bunch of machines that beeped and clicked and gave me a big stack of papers that showed all these things wrong with me, and then sold me these big bag of herbs to make teas and gave me ionic foot baths. And, as I'm doing these ionic foot baths, I'm seeing all this brown stuff in the water, and I'm questioning, what is that? And he's telling me, well, that's yeast coming out of your feet. And I said, well, it looks like oxidation of electrodes and rust. No, he said, no, that's yeast. And those things, that other stuff on the top there, which just looked like, some flocculant. He said, well, those are heavy metals. And I said, well, you're sure? Oh, yes, you have to trust me. I said, fine. And this went on for a couple of months, did absolutely nothing for my insomnia. So at that point, I'd had enough. Yeah. And I just quit all the doctors. I quit all the naturopaths I was seeing and just figured it out myself. So I went and bought every single book I could find, alternative medicine. I read research papers. I went at it just like I do my normal job, and which as a research scientist. And I just figured out I had a mineral deficiency. I was studying the likes of Dr. Joel Wallach and Dr. Eric Berg and certainly Dr. Andrew Cutler, and the list goes right on down. Every book on gut problems and anxiety, mineral deficiencies, amino acids, nutrition, meditation, you name it, I read it. And I figured out I had a mineral deficiency. And so when I supplemented with magnesium, potassium, my anxiety disappeared. And I got pretty freaked out about that. I said, how can that be? Why didn't any of these doctors I saw for all this time ever just mention to me, hey, Bill, you got to think about minerals. Supplement minerals that might help your anxiety and your insomnia. And so the next question was, I had to figure out, I didn't always have this mineral deficiency. What caused it? And of course, I went through the hair analysis and figured out I had mercury. So at that time, I was detoxing, and mercury was pretty high in my blood. And so I began detoxing. And so then I began studying all the detox methods over time. I got into Rife technology. I started treating people for chronic disease. And then once I really got into this, I became almost addicted to learning about alternative medicine and everything involved with it, detoxing. And I just started treating people and healing them left and right. I started Rife technology, and I just took to it like I was made for it, or it was made for me. And I started healing everybody. And then eventually I grew into a regular full-time business. It went from part-time to full-time. And now I do everything, fourth stage, fully metastasized cancers, parasites, viruses, bad bacteria. I do the you-know-what, which we can't talk about, which is really a weak virus for Rife technology. There's all the frequencies for that one. And I treat just about everything you can imagine, chronic pain, inflammation, neurodegenerative diseases, everything and anything you can imagine. And I became a specialist at detoxification of heavy metals because, this is what I was going through. And of course, I read through all of Andrew Cutler and his work. And then I read the books where people were using the Andrew Cutler method of the chelation every 3 hours and every 6 hours and so on. And it seemed like people really suffered through redistribution of heavy metals in the body. And so I looked at other things. Now, who took over for Andrew Cutler, I think, was a guy by the name of Dr. Chris Shade. And he really got into studying more the production and the upregulation of genes to increase the level of glutathione in the human body, to detox the heavy metals that way. And when I studied mercury and how it was stored in the body, I knew it was stored in 80% in the kidney and 10 to 15% in the liver, and then the rest in the brain.
Let me unpack some of that stuff because there's a lot of information there. And I know some of my listeners maybe want things broken down into a little bit more understandable. So first thing, when you were talking about you didn't know anything about the adjuvancin vaccine, I just want people to know that adjuvants are something that's, you can explain, it's added to the vaccine, like preservatives and stuff, right?
Right. So mercury is added to vaccines as an adjuvant. Now, an adjuvant is supposed to work with the attenuated virus or with the live virus sometimes to increase the inflammatory effects, to have an overall immune response that's going to benefit the person getting the shot, to increase immunity against the disease. But what I found out from reading all these books and papers is that the adjuvant actually causes a totally different immune inflammatory pathway that really creates over-inflammatory conditions that is not a benefit to the human body. And that's through my study.
Right, and this has been a problem for, so many people. That's, when it was added, it was called thimerosal, which is mercury. And I think, I lost my mom to a flu vaccine, and so I'm very, very familiar with mercury poisoning because you see it when somebody's dying of that. And you went on to talk about Dr. Wallach, and that's so interesting because I found him, oh my God, I want to say like 25, 35 years ago. And remember that tape he made? It's called Dead Doctors Don't Lie.
Dead Doctors Don't Lie.
Yeah. And I had like 50 copies of that, and I passed it. I took his minerals in my fridge every day. He's an amazing guy, and he was a vet and then a doctor, and he talked about how most people are dying from mineral deficiencies. But when you mentioned that when you took magnesium...
I was taking magnesium chloride, which is a salt, the way the magnesium form that exists in the human body. But also I'm a fan of a chelated magnesiums as well. I think it's magnesium glycinate. I think that is good too.
So you took magnesium and potassium?
Yes, but just a potassium chloride, about a quarter of a third of a teaspoon. I would take that at night and totally got rid of the anxiety over time. So
the potassium chloride is the direct one that got rid of your anxiety?
Yes.
That's interesting.
And it's super cheap. It's, buy a kilo of it out of Amazon for maybe $20 or something. It's very cheap. And I always recommend that for any of my clients going through anxiety, and it works for them. And it also improves their insomnia conditions. So yeah, I'm a big fan, and I've read all of Wallach's books over the years. I must have heard him talk 50 times on all these different shows. So he was a big influence on my work.
How do you take the magnesium chloride?
Oh, geez, I'd just take a half teaspoon in a glass of water and drink it.
Once a day or right before bed?
Right before bed. If you're experiencing a lot of problems with detox, you can take with a dinner or with a lunch, you can take a magnesium chelate, and I think that's good. If you're going through detox, if you're going through mercury toxicity and mineral deficiencies that you can figure out through a hair test, it's good to supplement magnesium twice a day because magnesium is so involved in energy production in the human body. It's one of the first minerals that the body dumps when you're in flight and fight reaction to maintain that status of, constant on the go. And it's one of the minerals that mercury takes the place of in hundreds and hundreds of reactions. So, and you can't overdose on it. If you take too much, it winds up giving you a bit of diarrhea, and that's about the extent of it, or loose bowels. So it's a win-win.
One thing that, because I trained in hair tests, so I used to do it for many years and still do it on myself because it's the best way, in my opinion, to learn about, especially mercury, but other chemicals, aluminum, and all kinds of even minerals that you may be dumping out so much. And I learned a lot learning how to do a hair test because you see, like autistic kids, you do their hair test, and the first results come back like they have no mercury in the body, and then they start doing like taking taking minerals. or doing something, and man, they start dumping it and their mercury levels go up, up, up. And that's the beautiful thing about hair tests. It's like the first test doesn't tell you anything, but by the third or fourth test, you start seeing what's happening in the body. And a lot of people can't believe that that's the best way to test for mercury, let's say. But it's a fantastic way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that you're 100% right on the money. The first test typically is what happens is if people are mercury toxic, they're not good excretors, and we can go through that, but they're storing the mercury in the organs in the brain. And so when they do enter the point where they're starting to supplement, and that's minerals, and the body starts kicking into detox mode, then you see the mercury jump into the blood from the tissues. Then it shows up in the hair test. Exactly. But when you get that first hair test, all you see is the deranged mineral transport that, you talk about Dr. Andrew Cutler, and I've heard his videos on your site. They're outstanding. I've really enjoyed them. And you see that deranged mineral transport where some are too high, some are too low. And that's the indication that those heavy metals are causing the problem. And when you begin to enter into detox, like I did, my mercury went off the chart, way off the chart. And I really had to engage in super detox. And then it went down, and my latest test is almost zero. I mean, it's just right in the reference range.
So my story is I was a pro golfer, and I got poisoned from the pesticides on the course. I am not clear if mercury or some form of mercury is used in pesticides, because there's so much crap in those things. It's hard to say, especially golf courses, because they're, made to look like plastic and perfect, kind of, and so they use a lot of chemicals. And I got so sick, and doctors couldn't help me, and I had to figure out how to do it myself. So I came across, just detoxing in general, just more thinking, I got to get these pesticides out of my liver and kidneys. I got to get myself well. And so that's been my journey, because my whole thing was about being poisoned, although I wasn't specifically saying it was mercury. But I'm really interested, because when I learned about the hair tests, and you learn how minerals get displaced by mercury, meaning that mercury, your body thinks the mercury in your body is zinc or something, and then it uses the mercury and then you're zinc deficient, because there's no room for both. So the minerals get pushed out. And it's interesting what you said is so common when you see mercury toxic people. They think they have a mineral deficiency, but it's because their body can't get those minerals, because it's using the mercury kind of in place of the mineral. And as you start detoxing, as you start detoxing, you start pushing out the mercury. But the big issue, and this is why I'm so interested in talking to you, because my passion is detox. You can't be well without it, and you cannot live in this world today healthy if you don't know how to detox, period. And what I love about what I do with homeopathy, and I don't know how familiar you are with homeopathy, but what I believe in since back in the 1700s, when homeopathy was invented by Samuel Hahnemann, then the French learned how to kind of support, I don't know if you want to call it detox or support, but it's like, getting your terrain stronger so that your body can get prepared for, let's say, a constitutional remedy. So they did things like kidney remedies just to get the kidneys working. And it's like, and then if you can't excrete, if your functions, if your excretion channels or your elimination channels are not working, you can go buy the most expensive product, do a juice detox, do a fast, do whatever, and in the end, you can't get anything out. You're going to get yourself pretty darn sick and dangerous. And I know a lot of people, they write to me on my podcast, and they tell me stories of how sick they were, and then they went and did like a big Corella thing or a chelator thing, and they now are in bed and they can't move, and they're sicker than ever before, because if you don't open up the channels of elimination at the same time that you're pushing mercury out. I had that experience doing some mercury stuff, and I could feel like I was moving it out, and then you start feeling like I was outside of myself, like I could almost feel like I could hear myself talking, and I felt so strange. And then I realized I'm I'm just reabsorbing it, and I need to work on my liver and kidneys, especially like you said, the kidneys, just to help get it excreted out. Because if you're dumping too fast, you can feel really sick. I think there's a part of that you got to go through probably anyway, but you really have to focus. So when I help people with detox, I really work hard with homeopathic remedies, supporting their kidneys, let's say first, then their blood, or then their liver, or then their bowel, or whatever it is, to help those channels of elimination. Because if you don't get those things open, you aren't detoxing.
Right, absolutely, 100%. Again, in regards to the golf course, absolutely, I've read specifically that golf courses will use herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides that will contain heavy metals. So there's no doubt about that. Now, they've since outlawed it in the United States. I don't know where else, but in these specifically fungicides, and they used to use a fungicide coating on seeds, which has caused a lot of death in different areas. That's one thing. The other thing is the diabolical nature of mercury is that when you get it into your body and you're not excreting it fast, and some people are fast excretors, others are not, and it has to do with methylation as well as the production of glutathione in the body. What happens, where does it get stored? Well, it gets stored in the kidney and liver, which are the two organs responsible for getting rid of mercury. Now, once it starts damaging those organs, well, then you have problems dumping the rest of the toxins that you're continually taking in, whether it be from air, the water, which you get a lot of aluminum from water because of aluminum sulfate and water treatment, and foods and so on. And then you just start building up more and more toxins in the liver. And it's not going to function until you get rid of the mercury. So getting your liver and kidney in order before you engage the rest of the dumping that's going on, which has a lot to do with, I think, intestine. If you talk about the work of Dr. Chris Shade, he'll talk about getting rid of the toxins in the gut and cleaning up the gut so you have proper elimination, because some of the mercury that's attached to glutathione may recirculate through a hepatoportal vein and get redistributed through the body. So that's some of the deals why some of the part where they want you to take intestinal binders, the chlorella, the spirulina, because it'll hang on to the mercury, preventing redistribution. And then you're going to have to be having a bowel movement twice a day to get rid of the methylmercury. And 80% of all the methylmercury in the body is supposed to go out through the gastrointestinal tract. Now, people that are inflamed with, non-functioning liver and a non-functioning kidney, if they have that kind of heavy-duty inflammation, they're not producing glutathione. So reversing the inflammation often means changing the diet, supplementing, figuring out the mineral deficiencies, getting rid of the mercury. And it's a complex process that's very difficult for a person to do on their own, because let's face it, one of the big problems of redistribution of mercury is brain fog, the lack of short-term memory, fatigue. And how are you going to remember to take all these things and do all these processes if you can't function normally?
And there's so much information out there. It's so confusing. Most people are more confused than anything. You can read one article and the very next click is someone saying the opposite, and it's easy, and this product and this product. And I know a lot of people that get themselves more sick trying to do it on their own without any help. And
Right.
this is something you can't mess around with. Mercury is something very serious, and that's why I was so happy, because shortly after I interviewed Dr. Cutler on my show, he was kind enough to give me a long interview, and I did 2 episodes with him, and about, I think, less than 6 months later, he died. And that's been, I think that's still my most watched episode, because it's a big deal. There's a lot of people searching, and they eventually get there. These really sick people eventually get to the idea that maybe it's mercury. So tell us a little bit about what were your symptoms when you said anxiety. You maybe in the beginning didn't relate that to the mercury. You just thought it was maybe insomnia, but now looking back, you can see that was probably part of your mercury toxicity. Did you have any of the other symptoms like rashes or any of the brain fog? Did you have any of that, or was it pretty much anxiety and insomnia?
Yeah, I attributed at that point in time the insomnia to adrenal overload causing anxiety, but it was really disruption of mineral transport. I used to have these horrible headaches in the afternoon, and when I detoxed mercury to a certain point, they were gone. I don't even know if I've ever had a headache since then. So that was another thing. So insomnia, anxiety, eventually hardcore headaches that went away. I didn't have any rashes or any of these other things that you might associate. Maybe some hair loss over time, a lot of fatigue, a lot of chronic fatigue. I'll tell you one thing I did that was wrong early on, years ago. I was growing coriander because I heard it was an herb that could help with mercury toxicity, and I was eating small handfuls of it raw in the morning. And it is an extractor. I'm not so much sure about a chelator. You read different reports, but it can extract mercury out of the body, that's for sure, and it's kind of dangerous. And since then, I obviously realized that I made a mistake. So what happened was, by the afternoon, I had such horrible brain fog that I couldn't really function. And so, it's a good idea to stay away from coriander. It's not a good thing to take for a person who's mercury toxic, because it really pulls out a lot of mercury into the blood, and boy, you just suffer because the body becomes overwhelmed. If there's just not enough glutathione, there's, maybe your kidney, liver is not up to the task of dumping all that mercury out of the body. And one of the things I recommend that has really helped me is the sweat therapies that I've done a couple days a week at least, and that really moves a lot of trash out of the body. And it also incites the kidney to start dumping more and the liver to start dumping more. And I really think it kickstarts the detox process where the whole body starts moving trash out through all the processes available. And it has such a long history, sweat therapies, for years and years and years.
For sure. I mean, that was one of the first things I invested in. Was I have an infrared sauna in my house, because they're not that expensive, and for the work that they do, and to have it right at your house, it's still to this day, I always say that's the best thing I ever bought. It helped when I first started getting in there. My sweat, when I would play golf and sweat, I didn't really have a smell to my sweat. When I started getting in the infrared sauna, it smelled like ammonia. And then there was a period of time for 3 months, my towel would smell like ammonia, and suddenly it's gone. It went away. So you can tell when Lloyd, my partner, he had to get a surgery, and he was before the surgery on morphine. When he started getting in the sauna afterwards, he was sweating out all that Vicodin, and he would get high again just from sweating it out.
Right.
So it just shows you how much stuff comes out.
Yeah, that stuff is stored in the liver. When it comes back out again, you can actually feel the intoxication because it's not all of it's processed. So some of it's stored in the liver. The liver does one amazing job. It's the biggest site for glutathione production, and it stores a lot of the toxins. So when you start detoxing, you get rid of trash. At the same time, you allow the liver to begin doing its job. And I'm a big advocate of liposomal glutathione and liposomal vitamin C because they protect the body from the oxidation, the ROS, reactive oxygen species. And the liposomal glutathione obviously gets into the blood and bypasses the stomach, and then it starts attaching to some of these heavy metals and other toxins in the body and pushes it through the gastrointestinal tract.
Time to grab a drink of pure water and move around a little bit so you can focus on the second half of today's show. And remember, if you want a great pure water distiller, then check out my website and go to the shop button and look at my recommended partner products, and you'll see the one that I use, and you can get it there. Just a reminder that if any one of you out there are interested in joining my VS Club to learn more about how to detox and help our elimination organs, you can join for only $15 a month. And you can check that out at vidalspeaks.com/VS Club. All right, you guys, let's get back to the show now.
Cleaning up the intestine really is a lot about the diet. I recommend 80% vegetable diet. There's a lot of antifungal foods. You have your ginger and your garlics and so on. So I recommend those. And of course, the intestine, the lining of the intestine oftentimes is a sink for mercury and a sink for other heavy metals. I don't know if you probably read the work of Hal Huggins, who was, he's one of them 80s guys that was a dentist and was into the detox therapies, and he was even into the Gerson therapy. I'm sure you're familiar with that. That's a classic.
Yeah.
That's a classic. And when you clean up the gut, you replace the bad bacteria and get rid of that fungal overload. He said, Hal Huggins stated that if a person could not get over the fungal overload in the gut, that they had a mercury problem. And the mercury in the body really prevented the immune system as identifying the fungal overload in the gut and getting rid of it and sort of keeping it in check. As you know, candida is a regular part of the intestine, but when it gets to be too much, possibly you take antibiotics and it cleans out the good bacteria. Well, when you have that bad bacteria and you have the fungal overload, those bad bacteria and the fungal overload change methylmercury into different forms, making it difficult to actually get it out of the gastrointestinal tract. So when they say clean up the intestine and clean up the gut, what they're referring to is not only by getting rid of the trash, but also to bring in some of the good bacteria which aid the detoxification of mercury and allow, more bowel movements to keep the gastrointestinal tract flowing, so that you're constantly getting rid of that bound mercury that's attached to the glutathione. And by studying Dr. Chris Shade over years, you listen to him talk about the people that are good excretors. Well, the people that are good excretors are the ones that can really get rid of the mercury as they're taking it in. Their glutathione kicks into production. They upregulate their genes. They produce the glutathione. They bind it, and they get rid of it. There's a certain number of people, maybe 30%, that are okay detoxifiers. They may get sick, they may get not. And then somewhere around 30% of the people that are poor detoxifiers that don't produce the necessary glutathione to get rid of those heavy metals. And I'm sure you've read a book by Dr. Ben Lynch called Dirty Genes. Same similar thing. You're not methylating, you're not making methyl groups, you have a hard time detoxifying, you have a hard time attaching these heavy metals to a carrier and moving them around the body through the liver, through the gastrointestinal tract, and out with the gastrointestinal tract, out with the regular waste every day. So cleaning up the gut, moving out that stuff regularly, increasing liposomal glutathione. Now, you mentioned that you're a vegan, and we know that vegetables contain 64 times the amount of antioxidants, and typically way more glutathione in vegetables than any other source, something like 35 milligrams a day. I think you can get from vegetables is the average amount. So a vegetarian diet or vegan diet high in vegetables automatically increases antioxidants, it increases the glutathione, and when you're increasing the antioxidants, you're upregulating the genes for producing glutathione, which is an NRF protein. I won't go into that, that's a long story. But the same thing will be told to you by Dr. Ben Lynch when he talks about increasing the methyl groups, turning on the genes to produce methyl groups. You're eating leafy greens, which will give you methylfolate. Okay, and this is going to provide methyl groups to kickstart the glutathione. You're drinking a lot of water. You're dumping a lot of toxins. Another thing that you'll hear Dr. Shade talk about is that getting rid of endotoxins associated with mold and fungal overload in the gut, and the taking in of endotoxins into the body creates an inflammatory condition, which prevents basically making a certain amount of glutathione that you need to detox these heavy metals. So it may come down to getting rid of a certain amount of trash so that you can reduce inflammation, so that you can produce the glutathione to get rid of the heavy metals. So,
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I'm very familiar with the Gerson therapy. My sister did it many, many years ago, and I have patients that have gone there. I interviewed Dr. Patrick Vicker, who he's like one of the Gerson specialists in Mexico. And
right.
That's one of the, they advocate coffee enemas because Dr. Gerson said that when in the 20s, when he started this detox thing, let's say a patient had a stage 4 colon tumor, and then they would do the Gerson therapy, and there would be a period of maybe 60 days into the therapy where they eat, it's all vegan and it's all some raw food, some cooked food, but very strict diet, very strict. And it's tons and tons and tons of veggies and juices. They have to do 13 juices a day. Anyway, he noticed that around the 30 or 60 day mark, they would see their tumor like fall into the toilet. And in the early days of his treatment, he noticed people were dying, and they were cancer free when they died, but they died because the toxins of the tumor coming out was so toxic it kind of killed them. And that's when he learned he needed to do something to help detoxify the liver so that they can get the toxins out. So on Gerson therapy, they have to do 5 coffee enemas a day. They've been advocating that for years and years. And as you know, I'm pretty sure that coffee enemas stimulate the glutathione, they say, and it's one of the great things where you can stimulate your own body to produce more glutathione to help get the toxins directly out. So when someone is doing a detox or going through a mercury detox, it's always very beneficial if they're open to it. Not everyone is to do. I've been doing, that was part of my, actually coffee enemas were a lifesaver for me because I had chronic migraines, and I could get off the aspirin that I was taking by doing a coffee enema because they could remove my headaches. So it was really a big thing for me, but also it was just a help for my liver after all the pesticides that were there. So, but people think it's a bowel treatment, but it's a liver treatment, the coffee enema. So it just reminded me of saying that since you're talking about glutathione, and I think that's a step, if people are open to doing that, would be worth trying. But I'm curious, I know Dr. Cutler's method, and in some ways I know a lot of, especially autistic moms who did that. Dr. Cutler, he has, as you know, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world that know his protocol and have done it, but it's very complicated. You're setting alarm and waking up in the middle of the night. It's very like you can't be too late. Everything's like really set on how many hours you got to take this, and the products like the DMSA and the other things that you have to take to chelate it out, you can't even get in America, and you could only get from one place in Australia. And oh my God, they just made it so difficult. But even if you could get it, it wasn't an easy process. And I'm just wondering, since you have now detoxed, do you think that what you've learned, that there's now a more tangible way that people wouldn't feel overwhelmed and could do this without the regimen that Dr. Cutler had to do by waking up in the night? Is there an easier way now?
Yeah, I think having done this for a number of people over the past 4 or 5 years, I think there is, if you read those books, and there's a guy from Australia who's got a mercury book, he's called Mercury, the Undiagnosed Epidemic, and another Irish woman who wrote a book on mercury, and they both did the Andrew Cutler method, and I think they had a lot of redistribution, a lot of pain and suffering went along with that because it's difficult to maintain, and I think there is a lot of recirculation. I think what you're saying about the colonics and doing the coffee enema is absolutely spot on. When that coffee hits the colon, it starts the liver, it signals the liver, I think it's through the hepatoportal vein, to start dumping, and it'll dump straight into the colon. Some people engage in these vitamin C flushes where they're purposely taking 5 grams or 10 grams of vitamin C per hour until they reach bowel tolerance, and then there's a flush into the colon. Something similar like that, and that's one way to dump all those toxins out of the body. The specific protocol I engage in is when I get somebody in, we run scans and treatments through the right technology. We do a hair test. We look at mineral deficiencies. We supplement to fulfill the problems of these minerals that aren't in the body, which is going to kickstart the detox protocol. I recommend supplementing with the liposomal vitamin C and liposomal glutathione because that's really chelating. Also increasing the antioxidants. This is a shade protocol where it upregulates. When you upregulate the genes, you're really initiating and supporting the body's own natural method of getting rid of heavy metals. Everybody has to deal with heavy metals. Another thing is selenium. So important. You'll hear Wallach talking about this as it's an antioxidant. It's super important for the heart. It will chelate mercury in the form of mercury selenide. If we look at the amount of mercury, let's say in the liver that will cause problems, I think it's about, it's 20 parts per million in the liver will kill somebody. It will kill somebody. 30 parts per million in the blood of mercury will kill somebody. But whales can take 13,000 parts per million of mercury in their liver, and the way they bind it is through selenium. They form mercury selenide. Now, I thought about that, and I said, well, geez, that's crazy. But the truth is, selenium is normally something that's used up during detox. It's an important antioxidant. It's one of the big minerals that people are deficient in that causes problems with the heart. It can chelate mercury and get it out of your body. So I always recommend, say, selenium, molybdenum, which recycles glutathione in the liver and helps you detox. And then with the liposomal vitamin C and glutathione, you're dumping and attaching heavy metals and trashing them out. Increasing antioxidants, you're encouraging the body to produce its own glutathione. And the last thing is sweat therapies. Sweat therapies have a history of years and years. We can even go back probably thousands of years to find people, certain cultures that engaged in sweat therapies just to rid the body regularly of all these toxins. And a lot of the people I see, they really can't afford all this expensive treatments. Certainly not when we do the intravenous chelations and all these other things. Like you mentioned, you can't even get the DMPS, DMSA. I think I got some from South Africa, but you can't find that stuff. It's really, and when you do find it, it's typically expensive. So anybody can engage in sweat therapies. You can do sweat therapies nearly every day. Where I live, it's so hot here that you'll sweat. Just go outside and walk around, you'll sweat. And that therapy, I think, nearly indiscriminately gets rid of all kinds of trash out of the human body. And the more you add glutathione and the more you chelate heavy metals, the more that the body will get rid of those heavy metals out through the sweat. And so when you're sweating, you're also really kickstarting the detox process. And when you find that you sweat, the kidney is then going to start dumping more and more trash out of the system. And then you'll find it really engages the detox, the whole detox methodology and the whole detox protocol of the entire body. Not just, I'm getting rid of some junk out of sweat. No, you're going to start dumping everything out through the gastrointestinal tract, out through the kidney. And we talk about the kidney being damaged where 80% of all the mercury is stored in the kidney. There are 200,000 people in the United States walking around with somebody else's kidney. I think I read a stat that was 2 million people need kidney dialysis every single day because they have all this trash in the kidney and they can't get rid of junk. So what do you got to do? Well, you're going to detox the kidney regularly, or you're going to have to get a new kidney, or you're going to have to be on dialysis the rest of your life because the body can't survive the trash. Our environment, our food, everything is now more toxic than ever. And part of that is going to be heavy metals. Hopefully, eventually, we'll get into aluminum. That is an insane story as well. But mercury is certainly increasing more in the environment now more than ever before. In your neck of the woods, you have 4 million acres of forest fires burning last year. And that is one of the areas that is most mercury toxic in the world, and that's around the San Francisco Bay Area. All that mercury is going up into the atmosphere, so you're inhaling mercury. You're potentially taking in mercury from food. Sacramento Valley has got a lot of mercury in the soils from the gold rush of 1849 to 1884. So they're producing rice that has mercury. So there's mercury in foods. China right now is burning more coal than ever. They burn more coal than the rest of the world combined. All that mercury goes in the atmosphere. Gold is $2,000 an ounce. There's more mercury in the atmosphere ever before because they're burning mercury off when they amalgamate the gold. 20% of the rainforest in Amazon right now is mercury toxic. Everybody wants the gold. Are you going to make $3 in a factory, $2 farming, or $20 a day painting for gold? Well, if you have a family to feed, and a lot of these Latin American families are big. My wife has 9 brothers and sisters that I've been treating. And so, people have to eat. They're going to do what they have to do.
Yeah, that's crazy, though. So it's true. I know the coal industry is so toxic. It's just spewing it into the air every day, falling into the ocean. No matter where you live, it's everywhere. And I had a friend who worked in San Diego. You might be interested in this. She was at the Scripps Clinic where they go out in the boats and they check the whales and the dolphins. She was more specifically working with the dolphins. And then they would a lot of them were tagged, and then they would go out and they would take a plug of their tissue, of their blubber, and then they would go back to the lab. And she said that, and this was just I don't know, 5 years ago or something, the last I talked to her, and she was telling me that it's so sad. That plug now it's so filled with plastic. First of all, it was almost all plastic, and then how much mercury is in these animals anymore, and anything in the ocean. I mean, seaweed's so good for you, but I'm afraid to even consume it because there's so much mercury. I'm worried that it's in the seaweed. How could it not be?
Right.
But,
absolutely correct. I always recommend to people, don't eat anything that comes from Asia. Asia is the den of iniquities for heavy metals. There is no EPA. There is no environmental parameters or protections there. Not that I've ever read or seen or talked to anybody about. You use whatever you want, you dump whatever you want, and all of that stuff, every single water source in China is contaminated with heavy metals. That's what I've read a number of times from a number of sources. So when they're growing all this food and the soils, and they use night soil, which eventually we get around to talking about, which is basically domestic waste. Domestic waste is one of the biggest heavy metal inputs into the environment, because this is the way people and animals process and get rid of heavy metals, 80% through the gastrointestinal tract. So when you're using this night soil as for to grow your crops, and you have 1.4 billion people, where do you think the nitrogen and phosphorus is coming from? It's coming from domestic waste. They're using it. Those heavy metals are getting into the soil. The more heavy metals you have in the soil, the more it enters the plants. Some plants absorb heavy metals more than others. Rice, wheat will absorb heavy metals much greater than something like grass, like a C4 grass, will not absorb mercury at all. And so, the cows that are eating the grass are basically very low in mercury. But if you have plants growing near a coal-burning power plant, you have plants growing on soils that are receiving domestic waste, they're going to pick up the heavy metals. Same thing for that, what you talked about with the seaweed. You're growing seaweeds in coastal waters near a high population center, I can guarantee you they're full of heavy metals. The reason is that when you look at these research papers, the closer you get to population centers, always 100%, there's going to be more mercury. The closer you are to people, the more mercury you have, the more heavy metals you have, the less, typically the less healthy the environment is, the less healthy the food is grown in that area. And so you really have to be careful when we're talking about organic and where things are grown. Right now, with all the forest fires, the coal burning, the artisanal mining, the artisanal mining that's going on, where people are you can easily buy mercury off a used metal market. It's pretty cheap. And it's easy to use. It works very good at amalgamating gold. But when you've got your lump of gold and mercury in the pan, you're not going to get paid for that. You're going to get paid for the gold. You got to get rid of the mercury. You want to do it quick, you burn it off and inhale that mercury. It goes up into the atmosphere, and then you get your gold and you go about your way. You get your money and you go about your way. So you have all these different sources of mercury going in the environment. So now I got to tell you that it's more mercury toxic than ever. I'm looking at the mercury levels in fish. They're going up continually. Right now, whales and dolphins are dying by beaching themselves at a rate of 10 times what they were 20 years ago. Nobody's talking about this because the media is stuffed with all kinds of you-know-what from you-know-where. But these things are dying. Coral reefs are getting hammered by a ton of different ways. Dolphins and whales are dying, but nobody's really talking about it. Getting back to the detoxification, one thing I've got to stress that I can't say enough is you have to start slow. It's a marathon. It's not a race. Many of my clients do not sweat, and they come into, they're toxic. They've got a variety of different problems. Sometimes it's kidney problems. Sometimes it's aches and pains. Sometimes it's insomnia. Sometimes it's immune system disorders. And the list goes on. And sometimes it's first stage cancers. The deal is and they don't sweat. I said, you need to get into sweat therapies. That's one of the first things. Kickstart the body and dumping. Get the body's natural detox processes going rather than, depending on a chemical agent to chelate stuff. Get the body going, get the body started and getting rid of the trash. But they tell me flat out, look, I don't sweat. And I said, well, you need to get out there. No, I walk, I do this, I don't sweat. The bottom line is you don't sweat, try taking a little bit of green tea. Try taking a little bit of cayenne pepper. Natural anti-inflammatories, which are good for you, for somebody who's mercury toxic. And you get out there in the heat and you're properly hydrated, a magical thing is going to happen. You're going to sweat. Now you're going to start sweating. Maybe you have a little bit of sweat on your arm, or you have, some sweat on your chest and so on. And, oh, hey, I'm sweating. After a time, the body becomes acclimated to sweating. And lo and behold, it won't be long. Weeks, months later, your whole body is soaking with sweat. And this begins the true process of detoxification. Now, while you're doing that, you're doing your hair test, you're fulfilling your requirements of your mineral deficiencies, you're engaging in liposomal vitamin C, which is protecting you from the oxidation, which is an anti-cancer. It's producing glutathione. It's boosting the immune system. It's healing arteries, because that's what it does. You're doing all that. It is a process, a natural process. I mean, all these things are in your body anyway. It's a natural process that kickstarts the detoxification mechanisms. And I have never heard anybody coming back to me saying, oh, dear God, I can't get out of bed. Oh, like Dr. Grishay would say, oh, I can't open my eyes because I engaged too much of the chelation therapies. I think the way to go is, and this is from years and years of research, reading thousands of books. There's a 2 rooms next to me full of books and research papers, because I'm type A and I had to figure everything out because I was just so into this. I couldn't stop. It was like going down the rabbit hole. I could not stop until I was done. One day I was done. But this method of engaging sweat therapies, of boosting the body's own natural compounds that it makes to get rid of this thing, inciting the body to begin the natural protocols, I find that people really don't get these detox, they used to call them Herxheimer reactions. I find that they feel better after a time. I detoxed one kid who was suffering from multiple sclerosis symptoms. He's 25 years old, for God's sake. I didn't know where he got the heavy metals, but getting a hair test, he had a lot of cadmium, and he had some mercury, and he had horrible mineral deficiencies, and oh God, sodium, potassium off the chart, and he felt terrible. But in 3-4 months' time, by doing all this stuff, he was able to reduce those symptoms where he had headaches and muscle pain and heart arrhythmias and all that stuff. He's able to get over all this stuff, and he goes about his way. And one day he comes into my clinic and he says, look, I don't have any more symptoms. And I said to him, look, you're healed. I don't want to see you anymore. Get out of here. Go live your life.
So that's interesting. I would like to ask you, what laboratory do you use for your hair test?
Yeah, I don't recommend any one or the other. I think they're all pretty good. We use Trace Elements of Texas. I've had some issues with them not doing things fast or efficient enough, but we sorted it out. It's $50. I like the report. It's very adequate. Look, you don't need those exact numbers. You don't need, I'm 0.93735. Nah, you don't need that. What you need to know is the trends. I want to know what's going on there, what's low. Typically, a lot of the times, there'll be one mineral that's super low. And when these people take that mineral, a lot of things come right with metabolism. A lot of the times it's low magnesium, because magnesium is the first thing that's dumped. A lot of the times it's calcium, but not all the time. Calcium is low in the body, and calcium is so important for cell membrane function that you can't function without it. Sometimes it's the classic zinc. Zinc is, part of metallothioneins. It's part of the chelation process in the kidney. If you supplement with a lot of zinc, I take 50 milligrams. I also take 2 milligrams of copper. When you're banging those zincs every day, it's driving down the copper because they're antagonistic. You should take a little bit of copper as well. Copper is super, super important as well. They're both super important. They both work together. They're kind of antagonistic on the mineral chart. So I always recommend you take those. But magical things happen when you're going about promoting the body's own natural therapies. One of the things I want to talk about, going through the process of reading all this stuff and writing articles and treating people and doing podcasts, I've just hammered on this stuff for years and years, and I figured some things out. There are the 3 really theories where people really get sick from chronic disease. One we've already hammered, mineral deficiencies in hair tests.
Yeah.
Nearly every single person that I send out for a hair test that's really sick is going to come back mineral deficient, too many minerals, what we call deranged mineral transport, and they're going to have heavy metals. One guy out of 100 back, and he didn't have it because he wasn't sick. He came in for a scan and a treatment and said, I just want to look at stuff. What do you got? And I said, we could do a hair test. We can run scans and treatments. A lot of different things we could do. So I did this thing. I couldn't find anything wrong with them. I said, get out of here. There's something wrong with you. I don't want to see you. We can talk on the phone, whatever. Come on, get out of here. So that was the one person. Every other person. And I've seen uranium and mercury and lead and cadmium, arsenic. Right now I've got arsenic and aluminum coming out of me still because I'm a 4-methylator and my liver has been damaged by mercury. And so I'm going through another process of probably 6 months to get rid of the junk. So one thing is mineral deficiency caused by heavy metals. I didn't know that. I had to figure that out.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the breakdown of the cell membranes. This is from oxidized oils. When you're banging those oils that you get from the Price Mart or wherever, Costco or whatever, you buy the gallon oils that are sitting on the counter and you're frying your foods, which is bad for you. All of those oxidized oils contain things like acrylamides and all this nasty stuff. It's a super inflammatory food product. Don't do it. So that's another thing. You got to change your diet.
Yeah.
You've got to get rid of all the inflammatory foods, which means no GMOs, which means no processed oils, which means no fried foods, which means low in gluten, which means an anti-inflammatory diet consisting of things like more herbs and chia flaxseed. The plant oils help to rebuild cell membranes, such as the hemp oil and the flaxseed oil. These are a part of cancer therapies because they're so good at rebuilding cell membranes.
Right.
The second theory of why you get chronically ill is your cell membranes are screwed because you're eating all these horrible fats and these horrible oils. Your body's taking the oils and making bad cell membranes, so they're not communicating. Cells aren't communicating. That's one of the theories of disease. So rebuild your cell membranes by eating good fats. The good fats are classically plant oils for other people that aren't vegetarians or vegans and so on. There's, eggs, chicken eggs. You'll hear a lot of people engaging in eating those because they're a good source of fats and protein. Sometimes you get into fish oils or the omega-3s. Omega-3s are always coming from your plants. The plants make the omega-3s, and so when you have fish eating those plants, you're basically eating a fish that's high in omega-3. The other thing, when we talk about anti-inflammatory foods, you need to watch and be careful with high oxalate foods. When plants are grown on soils that contain a lot of aluminum, and we'll just touch on this briefly, they contain a lot of oxalates. The 3 oxalate foods, buckwheat, spinach, rhubarb. There are some others. But these particular foods grown on soils that contain aluminum contain so much oxalate because the plant uses oxalate to bind the aluminum, and sometimes it pushes out into the soil, sometimes it pushes it into the leaves, sometimes you don't eat it, but the plant still has a lot of oxalate, and it's very, very inflammatory. Now, if you're already inflamed from mercury and you're not making glutathione, okay, and I think women make more glutathione than men, so men tend to be more mercury toxic, and that's part of the deal. That's just the way we're made. It's important to be careful of those inflammatory foods. So you're not banging them processed foods, which contain a lot of, there's something like 24 milligrams of aluminum you're going to get every day from your processed foods. And the oxidized oils and some of these inflammatory foods which contains the oxalates.
Wow, a lot of information there, right? And I know what you guys were thinking. I didn't do that much talking, which I usually do, but there was so much information there. He was on a roll, and I just wanted to let Dr. Bill go. But I always have a million questions, as you know, but the information that he gave us was so detailed that I honestly feel really good about what he shared with you guys today. And this is just part 1, and he's already shared with us some of the main things that we can do to help mercury detox out of our bodies. But in part 2, you're going to hear a lot more about that. So be sure you watch for part 2 coming up shortly after this one. I love doing this kind of podcast because it really brings awareness to people where they're getting the toxins from, what kind of symptoms could be coming from this kind of toxin, and finally a great how to remedy the problem, right? I love Dr. Bill's solutions, and it was really interesting to learn that mercury settles into the kidney and liver. And you guys don't forget, homeopathy has been around for hundreds of years, and it's really well known to help detox the elimination organs. And that's what I do a lot of in the VS Club. So that's an avenue that we didn't talk about today because Dr. Bill, that's not his specialty, that's my specialty. But I'm telling you, homeopathy can really help support and detox your kidneys, your lungs, your liver, whatever elimination organ. It's really important, and it's super great to do it with homeopathic remedies because they're energy medicine and therefore they have much less side effects. But I love all these positive solutions, and more are coming. I think we're all seeing how important diet is and getting huge amounts of antioxidants, which of course is from plants and fruits and nuts and seeds and grains. It's the vegan diet, that's the health diet. I hope everyone is realizing that at this point, but that's not enough anymore. We have to detox. We can't just count on our elimination organs. We're being bombarded with toxins, and we need to help those elimination organs. And then we need to take products that helps get this stuff out through our elimination organs. All right, you guys, I'm really excited that you got to hear this today, and I can't wait for you to listen to part 2. And I know that you guys know what time it is by now, right? Yep, it is time to say goodbye, but only until the next time, and I'll see you right back here around my table, and we'll be talking more about mercury and detox. And until then, eat your plants and get a gigantic dose of antioxidants. All right, you guys, ta-ta for now. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing, of course. Peace, be healthy, be free, live life.
Oh, one of the things we haven't touched upon, but we should, is when you have two heavy metals, and there's always a couple of heavy metals. It's never just, well, looky, I've got mercury and that's it. Look, if you're sequestering mercury into your tissues and you're not getting rid of mercury, chances are you're not getting rid of those other heavy metals, and you're always taking aluminum if you're eating processed foods. It's in the water, it's in the food, it's in the air. If you believe in chemtrails, I won't get into that. That's a whole other deal. But when you have mercury and you have another metal, and there's two or three metals, and it's always two or three, never one, according to everything I'm looking at with these hair tests, there's a synergistic reaction between the metals, which creates more of an inflammatory condition. So when you have two metals together, it creates more of a problem than if you just had one, or if you could just consider the sum of those two metals. Has that been your experience? You're familiar with this?
Well, in all the years I did hair tests, for sure, aluminum was high in everybody I tested. Everybody.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, unbelievable. Shockingly high. Mercury I used ARL labs, and it will look like, the person will go, that's good, my mercury is low. But it's not really, because the lowest bar is still like really toxic. So when you see someone that's got a line that's a half-inch long, that's like super toxic. But mercury, so it depends on which lab you're using. But I definitely found mercury and aluminum were by far the two. Then I had certain patients that had nickel, a lot, and what was really interesting about the nickel, and I think it's Gerson, but they talk about this as like a cancer-causing metal.
Yes, they do. They do.
And interesting, many times it was like what we're talking about. They would start with what I would say they had a nickel toxicity. Then you start taking the minerals, and man, I saw nickel on some people's go off the chart, like unbelievable amount of nickel coming out. Some people, I saw manganese come out of a lot of people, but not usually in the start. And I could never figure that out. One guy, he did a lot of like his business was something to do with guns. So I wondered if it was something to do with ammunition or something, because he worked on this range. But he had a gigantic amount of manganese. But usually, by far, it's aluminum and mercury that you see that's so gigantic.
Wow, I haven't seen a whole lot of nickel. I've seen uranium for ex-military. I've got a lot of ex-military friends that are retired that won't talk to me about chemtrails ever. And it's a funny with me. I tease them. But anyway, I haven't seen nickel. I have seen uranium with ex-military.
Where is the uranium coming from? I'm so interested about where they're getting that from.
Because as far as I know, people working on military bases are exposed to uranium because it's used in processing ammunitions, and it's used in, I think there's uranium depleted shells that they use in some. They don't talk to me about that because it's classified. They don't ever mention anything, so I tease them about that. But anyway, it's used in the process of munitions, and that's where it comes from. And I have people that work on military bases that come to me and I say, hey, where do you get all this uranium? And then we can't only talk about it so much. But the only thing I found in the literature is that carbonates. So you're going to, like your sodium bicarb, will help get rid of uranium as a uranium carbonate, and that's the only thing I found. I haven't found really high numbers, but they're there. It's in the reference range, but I have not seen nickel. I haven't really seen that.
In the lab that I use, sadly, they don't test as many of the metals as the lab you're talking about. That's why I asked you. So I have, Lloyd, my partner, he has a life history of stomach problems. And horrible nails, totally like mineral deficiency. When I started doing hair tests, right now he has a chronic pain syndrome. He has kind of a neuropathy pain in his feet. And when I interviewed Dr. Cutler, I was thinking, geez, I'll bet you, like Lloyd, this is all like mercury toxicity. The problem with him is he woke up after a surgery and his feet were in pain. He had a neck surgery and then he woke up. So likely it's something that they probably did, but just in case, who knows? It could have been a medication they gave that then you become. But we did a hair test in another lab, and they tested for uranium, and I had never tested for that in the lab that I used, and he was high in uranium. Now, he's never been in the military, He's never done any of that stuff. And I just wonder, like, where the heck is someone getting uranium? That's just such a weird metal to be high in. And I wonder what the symptoms are of uranium toxicity, if it has something to do with nerve pains and nerve problems. I could imagine it would, without, how. And we have in homeopathy, the beautiful thing about homeopathy, we have a remedy made out of everything, every mineral, and that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, just with all your knowledge about mercury. So homeopathy is, as you know, it is not the same as an herb. They take whatever the poison is, and it's not always a poison. It can be a beautiful plant, but it could be a snake poison. We use remedies made from strychnine, from arsenic, from everything toxic, everything whatever. Mercury's been one of the first remedies that Hahnemann proved many years ago. We use mercury in homeopathy it's a very destructive disease, like, let's say, Parkinson's. Not all Parkinson's would require mercury, but mercury is one of the remedies that I've used in my practice when someone has Parkinson's, because the process of Parkinson's is very destructive. The brain is degrading away and the nerves are like MS, kind of same idea. So, but one thing that's interesting, Hahnemann, he lived in the 1700s, and the life was a lot easier and not as toxic back then. But one thing that he discovered, that when he gave arsenic to people, but let's say people have arsenic poisoning, especially from the water. It's really easy to get from the water tables, now in rice, sadly. So, but when he would give arsenicum album, which is the name of the remedy that's made from arsenic in homeopathy, he noticed people were excreting out arsenic. So, in other words, giving the remedy, because they're taking one drop of something that could kill you, and they're diluting it, 100, in 100 drops, one drop of the toxin to 99 drops of water. Then they succuss or energize the vial. They take one drop of that, put it in the next vial, add 99 drops of water, succuss 100 times, one drop of that into the next one. When they do that 30 times, it's called a 30C potency in homeopathy. So that means, and that's why doctors and scientists hate homeopathy, because they look under the microscope and they say there's nothing in it. Because what they're not taking in consideration is that it's energy medicine. Every 100 times they hit the vial, every time they hit the vial like that, it's like a memory in the water molecules of the original substance. So it's really safe in that regard, because you're not giving an actual substance, you're giving the energy of a substance. And I thought it's really interesting when people, because Hahnemann noticed that when he gave arsenicum album, people excreted more arsenic out. And I know there are some people who give low potency, like maybe a 6C or a 12C of mercury. And I still think you have to support the kidneys at the same time, support the liver, support the bowel. I'm not saying only do this, but I'm just saying I would love to see an experiment of someone doing a protocol and you add mercury homeopathically and see if they excrete out more mercury in their hair test. And I think that would be interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with homeopathy. I know what it is. I've studied it. I haven't gotten into it yet. But you mentioned mercury as a medicine. What a history! If we go back 2000 BC, you find it in Egyptian tombs. You find it used in Chinese medicine way back then. If I fast forward to the 1500s, it was used against syphilis. It was an antibacterial.
Well, yeah. Exactly. That's what we used it for in homeopathy back then. It's a very destructive process, like syphilis.
Right. So they're using it, but if when they put it in the vaccine, and this is related to autism, is that it's a bacteriostatic. It's not a bactericide. And so I don't know if you've read Dr. Jane Hightower's book, Mercury book, but it's very interesting. And she says, look, this mercury doesn't even kill bacteria. It prevents the growth, but it doesn't completely kill it. So, and then it has a very bad effect, obviously, causing lots of problems when with that adjuvant inject. I won't get too far into that. But you mentioned medicine and mercury. In China, it is still used today. Mercury, you will find it in medicine. They still use mercury in certain skin lightening creams. I've done videos on that. I found it pretty mind-blowing.
Wow.
But in Mexico, there's a thing called crema de belleza, and they'll put mercury in there because it lightens the skin while it's killing you. And so people become very mercury toxic if you're using a lot of it. And you find mercury is in, even not so long ago, in teething powders.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but somehow mercury worked its way into teething powders for, children, obviously cutting teeth, and I don't, it's obviously going to cause a toxicity. Does the toxicity give relief from the teething and the pain? I'm guessing, and it's just mind-blowing. A number of children became mercury toxic from that. Another example is mercury in soap powders in, I think this is Argentina. It might have been Argentina, it might have been the UK. I can't quite remember. There's so many stories. But this was put in there as a cleaning agent, causing all this mercury toxicity. And you wonder how, the companies could do that ethically, putting this stuff in there. It's an absolute mind blower. And if we got into the story of how mercury made its way into amalgam fillings, it's a sick, twisted story that once you understand it, it just baffles the mind. I don't know if you want to get into that now. We've already covered so much ground, but
Yeah.
It's an amazing history.
Well, it's really important for people to know where they're getting their mercury from. Like, okay, we've talked about the environment, the ocean, which includes our diet, because many people are eating from the ocean, and just all the mercury in the air from the coal industry. It's spewing all over the oceans, all over the world. Then you have people, the food that's being imported from China, which is grown in high heavy metal poison soil, whether it's mercury along with all kinds of other things. But then it's in our own mouths, many people, and there's still dentists today that still use amalgams. And it's so interesting that they call it amalgams and not mercury, because it's like they were trying to cover it up, I guess. But,
Right.
But then, there's so many ways that we can be mercury toxic. And if we add that to our own body's elimination organs not working, and kidneys being so stressed these days, as you said, we personally have 5 friends. One right now, he's end stage kidney's been 5 years on a list, still can't get a kidney, doing kidney dialysis. Lloyd's friend has who's had 3 kidney transplants already. I know another person on her 2nd kidney transplant, and these are young people, like 60 years old. This guy that I'm talking about, he's like 53 or something. So kidneys are going. Kidneys and people are not good today. Almost everyone has some kind of form of kidney problems, and like you said, if mercury's storing 80% in the kidneys, you can understand why so many people are needing kidneys today. Jesus, that's crazy.
Yeah, the history, when I started getting into this, I had to go back and look at every source of how it all started. If we go back to the 1800s, mercury was referred to as quacksilver, and anybody who was using mercury was known as a quack. So if you were an MD using mercury, and they did, because after all, in the 1800s, you could buy liquid mercury to drink as a remedy for constipation. Now, it would work, but it would create something they called back then mercurial tumors. So it was obviously it was a carcinogen. And so if we fast forward 1850s, they start using mercury in people's teeth. And back then, people knew it was really toxic, and they said, "Look, you're a quack. Don't use mercury. Don't use that quacksilver." And so, but the funny thing happened, and when they put it in people's teeth, it used to crack the teeth. When it dried, it expanded. And so what happened is, in the early 1900s, the American Dental Association comes along. They perfect the combination of metals in the amalgam, so when they put it in somebody's teeth after it's mixed, it doesn't expand and break the tooth. Well, now all of a sudden, from the 1800s to the early 1900s, suddenly the American Dental Association says, if you're going to be a dentist, you have to use mercury amalgam. It's required. You can't say anything bad about it. If you do, you will lose your license. So when the dentist, way back when I got 10 mercury amalgam fillings, I had them taken all out 10 years ago. When the dentist was using it, he didn't say mercury amalgam, because people would have got angry. What do you mean mercury? Would you just say mercury? What are you going to do? Put mercury in my mouth for? I don't understand. Why would you do that? That's what I would have said, because everybody knows mercury's toxic. If I was a teenager, I would have known that. But all he said, just like what you said, I remember saying it to his assistant, go ahead and mix the amalgams.
Right, exactly. And interesting that dentists have the highest rate of suicide.
Yes, that's right. Within that profession, you're talking about the new Mad Hatters. We haven't gotten into that. This is a classic part of the story.
Right.
We're going back to the Industrial Revolution, 1800s, 1860. You've got Alice in Wonderland. So the hatter is using mercury nitrate to condition the materials to make hats, and he's inhaling the mercury gas. It easily passes the blood-brain barrier, gets into the brain, changes into an ionic form, and it's trapped there. Back then, they didn't have alpha-lipoic acid. They didn't have Dr. Andrew Cutler. The guy just went nuts, and he just played this odd behavior. He was like more of a hermit. He was nervous. He didn't have eye contact, sort of the symptoms of autism, and he was a weirdo. He was a little bit nuts, talking to himself, wandering around, stumbling. He had what they called the Hatter shakes. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's, the Hatter shakes. He was constantly using mercury, had the neural inflammation. I mean, he died young from inhaling mercury. So the same thing with the dentist. Inhaling the mercury over time, they have oral behavior disorders, neural inflammation. They have, like you said, highest rates of divorce and suicide. So they're really the new Mad Hatter. I'm just looking at some information here. You realize right now 45% of all dental restorations are still using mercury. During the 1990s, in the United States, there were more than 275,000 mercury amalgam fillings put in people's mouths every single day. Okay, it's estimated that 75% of all the people in the United States have a source of mercury implanted. Each filling contains 750 milligrams of elemental mercury. There are 1,000 tons of mercury in the mouths of people in the United States. 70% of all the fillings as of year 2000 were mercury amalgam. The human body requires 70 days to get rid of 1 day's exposure to the mercury vapor from mercury amalgam fillings. After 30 days of chewing with mercury amalgams in your teeth, mercury can be found in every tissue throughout the body. And of course, it's a $1 billion a year industry, mercury amalgams.
Amazing.
So why would they continue to use them?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable that they would still do that, but they still do use it. And, here in Panama, if you went to the dentist, they automatically give you a plastic or a ceramic filling. Nobody uses mercury amalgams anymore. And I think I have clients that still have them, that are afraid to get them out because they've heard some things. Oh, no, don't take them out. You don't need them out. All the mercury is still out of them, but there's still important compounds like nickel and so on.
Yeah.
That is toxic. It's still being released from the metals. Sometimes the metals are like a battery, and they'll transport the metals directly into the brain via the nerves from the teeth directly into the brain. That's a transport mechanism. You inhale the mercury into the hippocampus through the nasal passage. After all, the nasal passage is incredibly absorptive. That's why people are snorting cocaine. It goes directly into the blood and into the brain, and you get high. Well, the mercury does the same thing directly through the nasal passage and through the blood-brain barrier, and boom, your mercury gets trapped inside the brain. So what a story mercury amalgams has. It's got to be the biggest source of mercury toxicity in the human body. In the future, I think the biggest source of mercury toxicity is going to be from fish, because people are getting switched on. You can't really, they switch from mercury and adjuvants into aluminum. Nowadays, most of the people in the big cities, you're going to get some plastic or ceramic fillings instead of the mercury amalgam. People are getting rid of the mercury amalgams. I advise everybody to go to the dentist that's clued up to how poisonous mercury is, and they gauge in the mass and the dams in the mouth, and they collect all the mercury amalgam, and there's lots of ventilation. One of the biggest sources of mercury contamination into the environment right now in places like New York and New Jersey is actually from mercury being washed down the drain from dental offices. That's one of the biggest inputs of mercury into the estuaries, into the environment, is actually from dental offices, both taking it out and both using it. I think I read something like 20% of the mercury is actually used and the rest is wasted, either in the atmosphere or down the drain or in the trash can or wherever. And of course, that's put in the environment. It ends up eventually in the environment turning into methyl mercury, and we haven't talked about that elemental mercury that gets into the sediments of an estuary is changed once it reaches an anaerobic area or an area without oxygen. It's transferred into the more toxic form of methyl mercury, transported up the food chain into fish, larger fish. Each level of the food chain, it increases by a factor of 10 till you've got this great big tuna, which is so toxic that if you eat it one time, it could make you acutely mercury toxic. It's so toxic.
Yeah.
I can just go through this. I can name 5, this should be a Jeopardy question, very funny, 5 people that have become extremely mercury toxic from eating the wrong type of fish every day as a pescatarian diet. Number 1, Jeremy Piven. He's a famous actor, actually had to quit acting because he was eating the wrong type of fish every day, became mercury toxic, had to go to the hospital. Number 2, Victoria Beckham.
Wow.
Everybody knows who she is. She ate a pescatarian diet, fish every day, got sick, had to engage in serious detox protocols before she died. Number 3, Robbie Williams. He's a singer, not necessarily my kind of music, but he's a Scottish pop singer. And same thing, pescatarian diet. The people are trying to maintain their weight. They're eating fish. They're getting mercury toxic. They have to engage in detox protocols or they're going to die. Another one, Janelle Monáe, famous pop singer, did the same thing, was eating, the tuna every day. Within a couple of months, she's so mercury toxic that she has to go to the hospital. Because the variety of different symptoms. We haven't talked about the variety of symptoms, but it's insane.
It's
insomnia,
insane.
anxiety, muscle pain, neural disorders, shyness, short-term memory loss, brain fog, shakes, problems, coordination and movement disorders, hair loss, receding gums. Salivation,
Everything.
you're talking hypersalivation with acute mercury toxicity. All of those things, and of course it causes Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, all that stuff. But we're looking at the vast variety of symptoms that is caused by mercury toxicity that I can't imagine why more doctors don't know about it. And if these doctors could have helped me and said, look, hey, look at heavy metals, do a hair test. We've done everything.
It's so interesting because all those symptoms of mercury toxicity are all because in homeopathy, it's like cures like. It's not the exact substance cures the exact substance. So like mercury, the remedy, not mercury, the poisonous substance, but the remedy.
Right.
If you look at its symptoms that it helps, that we give it for, it's all those symptoms of mercury toxicity. It's so interesting. And speaking of I'm sure you wouldn't be able to find it now because our internet is so censored, but there used to be a video up where they put 2 amalgams in a sheep in their teeth. Did you see that? And it was what was it? It was like 5 days or something like that later. They did a scan of his body and they could see that he had no mercury in his body. Then they put 2 amalgams in his teeth, 2 or 3. And then they took a scan like 1 week later or something like this. And his kidney, it was unbelievable how much mercury was in this sheep's body. And then they were saying, they did another video. There was this video where it was in a house and it was like in the carpet. They had put, and you could see it like the vapors coming up. And they brought in like the people with the gas masks and the clean and the hazardous waste team. They came in and cleaned the carpet in the whole house. And then they took another video and it was still producing the same vapors, even after the hazardous waste was cleaned up. And they have a tooth where someone had their filling 30 years ago. I think it was on the Gerson video somewhere. And they have this tooth, and they take the tooth out or the filling out, and you see it while it's in that person's mouth. You see with a black light camera or something, you see the vapors coming out of a filling in a person's mouth that's 30 years old. That makes you want to go run and get your amalgams out ASAP when you start seeing that. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Right. Total, once again, 100% on the money. What you find on the internet is so much misinformation. They'll say, well, if they're old mercury amalgams, you don't need to get them out. It's all a bunch of conspiracy, or it's all a bunch of, just dentists to make money. Whatever the junk is, it's just not true. The mercury is still coming out of the mercury amalgam. It's still it's still leaching other bad metals into your body. And then the deal is that you just have to get the right dentist that understands the toxicity of mercury. Because remember, the American Dental Association says you have to use mercury amalgam. I don't know what it is now, but back in the day, you can't say anything bad about it. You have to use it. If you don't use it, you're going to lose your license, and you're going to lose the benefits of being part of our organization. And so you imagine having to work under that sort of stress, because dentists aren't stupid people. They're doctors. They understand the toxicity of the mercury. But I think sort of like MDs, Deborah, like MDs that are brainwashed into, when you do the MD, I'm going into World Without Cancer by G. Edward Griffin.
Yeah.
When you do your MD, there's no nutrition courses. There's no courses on toxicologies of heavy metals. You are brainwashed into believing everything that you're told by the university.
Yeah.
Because who runs the curriculum of the university,
Big
the medical
pharma.
universities, the pharmaceuticals.
Right, big pharma and big food, both. They're sponsored by Pepsi, Coke, the sugar industry, and all of the drug industry.
You got it. And what is the university protocol for research methodology? Something on a drug. You're going to do research on this drug to show the efficacy, and then we're going to sell it. So they make money going in and they make money going out. That's the way the whole monopoly, that's the way the whole scam works, is that there isn't any. So, here I am getting angry because nobody could help me.
Right.
Well, I guess,
me too.
what the hell did I think? When I read The World Without Cancer, the whole thing is designed that way.
Yeah.
It's designed that way. It's brainwashing the very people who are supposed to be doing their job, so they have no idea. They look at me, they say, oh, no, that guy. The MD's here in Boquete, Panama. There's only one I work with. And she knows how damn good I am at what I do in killing cancer. I've got 4th stage, fully metastasized cancers, and I'm killing all the cancer cells, and these people are getting better. But the rest of the MDs, as soon as they find out Rife technology, I say the R word, the 4-letter R word, they won't talk to that patient ever again. No, you can't use that. That's a scam and whatever. And if I hear all this BS about people saying, well, if that worked, everybody'd be using it. Well, the truth is, I don't want to curse, but the whole frickin' medical industry is geared around to convincing people that these things don't work. If we look at Rife, way back in the day, 1920, he's healing people from cancer therapies. Using his cancer therapies, he's healing people from this chronic cancer disease that are going to die. Well, as soon as they find out they can't patent and make a ton of money, what happens to him? They shut him down. They steal his stuff. Why is the Huxley cures? Classic. Dear God, the classic. Huxley, he has a horse that has cancer. He says, look, I'm going to let this horse die. He lets it out in the field. The horse goes around and eats these herbs and cures himself from cancer. The guy's freaked out. He starts following the horse around, writing down these herbs. One of them is red clover and these other detox herbs. Well, he puts together this cancer remedy, and he presents it to the public. He starts healing people from cancer. Oh, God forbid you do that and help somebody. You better get your behind down to Mexico, buddy. You're in big trouble. So they prove that, no, you can't say you can heal cancer from giving people herbs. How dare you? You leave the country right now. So now when people want to get healed from cancer, and we can go all the way back to Steve McQueen in the 50s, I think, you have to go to Mexico.
Exactly.
You can't get healed, or you go to Deborah Vidal or somebody else. But back in the day of Huxley and Rife and some of these other guys, you got shut down. You got in trouble, you lost your license, and you had to go to Mexico.
Yeah, I know. I interviewed several people on my show. One of them's Greg Caton. I don't know if you know his story, but he lives in Ecuador now because he had to leave. They put him in prison because he invented the blood root salve that was getting rid of people's skin cancer. And he he spent hard time in a hard prison, and Ecuador gave him like exile, and because now they have a great herbalist, and he's a smart guy, and now he lives there. But you have to, it's sad. It's sad. This is what medicine is in our country. It's more pharmaceutical prescriptions, but you just, like what I try to tell my audience all the time, you have to take the responsibility for your own health. You don't even believe what I say. Just just go look it up yourself and use it as a springboard to platform into something that, will start making sense to you. Or maybe you try it and you start finally feeling something better, or it gives you an idea or something, because that's the hard thing right now is just, everything is kind of censored. People are confused. And it's true. My dad's a doctor. He's old now, but even in his day, they didn't learn one nutrition course, and they still don't today. And they don't tell you anything about food, anything about detox, nothing like that. And yet we'll have like a kidney doctor tell me, I don't know what's going on, but I've never seen so much kidney disease in my whole life. But yet they go to school and they don't learn anything about why that is or how to treat it. But I've known about I don't know if we can even say it, but the Rife machine. But I've known about that forever. I've always wanted to get one, but there's a lot of like copies out there and I never know. So maybe you can email me and tell me a good one that I could look into.
Yeah, I've been using it 5 years, and it can help with pain and inflammation. I can advise you how to go about setting up remotes, and we can maybe do a session on Rife therapy. I've done a couple of them.
Yeah,
I've done with John White, who's the inventor of the Spooky 2 software. I've done a couple. I've done one for Finding Genius podcast and all that, but we can get into that, and you can ask me specific questions. I'm an absolute master of that therapy. I've been using it 5 years. I've encountered every kind of disease, and I have about 95% success rate. But people, we haven't touched upon this. Two things I want to talk about. One is that people have to want to be healed. They have to change the diet. They have to make the commitment. They have to want to be healed. And it's almost stupid. But look, people have to they have to come here and make the decision that, look, I want to do this. I want to do that. It's not most of the time. It's not just a one visit thing and all the heck with it. I've done that. It doesn't work. They have to be committed. They have to want to. The other thing is talking to the publisher of Hal Huggins' book called It's All in Your Head. Oh, man, what a book. What a book. He talks about the Gerson therapy like you mentioned. But Hal Huggins got put in jail. He was a good dentist in Florida. He was a smart guy. He learned all this stuff about detox and mercury after his degree. He became this detox specialist in Florida. Some of my clients have seen him and were treated by him. They wind up putting him in jail because he said the wrong thing. The thing he said, from what I heard from the horse's mouth here, is his publisher, is that he said that he could cure cancer. And back in the day, that was a no-no. You can't know. I talked to MDs and they said, well, let me tell you something. It's a neoplasm. There's no cure for it, and we don't know how it comes up. It's a neoplasm that magically appears. And I said, you're full of, you know what? I said, it's a toxicity. It's shutting down the immune system's ability to recognize a cancer cell and kill it. It's based on toxic load in the human body, sometimes on parasites, and that's what we're going to get into right now. Hal Huggins gets put in jail. When he gets out of jail, finally, he dies mysteriously about it, just like that. But so we talked about mineral deficiencies. We talked about cell membranes. Here's another name, as I'm dropping names, name bombing, or whatever you want to call it. The other thing that we can talk about is, what about Hulda Clark? All chronic disease is based on the parasitic load in the human body. Yeah. When I first read that a decade or 2 decades ago, I said, nah, this can't be. People in the United States don't have that much parasites. That's a load of BS. But two things. One, I found out that they do have a lot of parasites. Two, every single water source in Panama has a parasite. And if you're drinking water here without filtering it down to 0.1 micron, using a Berkey filter or one of these filters, you're going to get a parasite. The parasites in the human body, they steal nutrition. They release toxins. They harbor toxins within them, so that when you kill a parasite, you're releasing a ton of trash into the body and thereby causing more problems of toxicity and inflammation. But those parasites themselves, look, one of the cures for cancer that seems to work that I'm finding out is a dewormer for dogs called Panicure. Now, I can't say that if I live in the United States. I get arrested. You can't help people. You're a bad man. But the truth is, I have a client right now that's suffering from metastasized prostate cancer, and one of the things he's done to reduce his PSA, which is a prostate cancer, blood test and all that. One of the things he's done is take an anti-parasite. Okay.
Yeah,
and
right.
He's the parasitic load on the body, and his PSA goes down, and he's killing cancer cells. How's that happen?
Well, Hilda Clark she used the Rife machine, and she used a lot of wormwood, which is an herb that's really good for parasites. But I know she used a specific frequency of the Rife machine to specifically work on parasites, right?
That's right, called the zapper. I built one of those.
Yeah, that's
where
cool.
you're holding the rods and you're putting a frequency into your body, and it's basically zapping the parasite. Now, when I got into these parasites and I started studying parasitology from a subtropical climate that I live in, people recently, within the past 3 months, are developing these wacky parasite infestations like leishmaniasis from you get bit by a fly and it transfers a protozoan into your blood and it goes through the body and causes all these weird things. And it's requiring multiple visits and multiple treatments and multiple channels for me to kill this other thing. The other one is something called schistosomiasis, another big word. And that is another parasite, I think, from a bug. I think it is from getting bit by a bug. I picked this up on my scans. I kill it. But the inflammatory process, the inflammation that remains in the human body from all the trash from that parasite, takes weeks to months to get over it. So I hear this, well, if you killed this parasite, why do I still have all these problems? And I have to sit down, and then we have to get into a 3-hour conversation in regards to the initiation of inflammation, the turning off of inflammation, how inflammation is formed, what happens with the immune system, and the immune system recognizes a toxic threat, and it's attached to a tissue, it attacks the tissue. Turning off the inflammatory condition is a difficult thing. It requires getting rid of toxins, shutting down the inflammatory system, and changing diets, and you've gone all through that. So really, that third thing that I'm glad we talked, I remembered to talk about it, and so on, and is getting rid of those parasites, which creates a lot of inflammation, steals nutrition from the human body. And Hulda Clark back in the day was doing that. And she was curing cancer, and once you get rid of the parasites themselves, as well as cancer cells, as well as cancer tumors, contain heavy metals. There's 1,000 times more heavy metals in that parasite, in that cancer tumor, compared to the rest of the body. So when you're destroying that trash, when you're destroying the tumor or the parasite, it's throwing out a ton of trash into your body.
Yeah, you don't understand. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that a lot of these parasites eat the heavy metals, but then they're excreting out their toxins, and their toxins are going into our lymphatic system, and we're basically being poisoned by their cellular waste. So that's why you have to just continually work on detox. I'm curious, how do you determine whether a person has parasites? What kind of tests do you do?
Okay, here in Panama, you'll see a lot of people going for fecal analysis, but it is just not conclusive. We use scanning. We use the Generator X from Suki2 software. When you run a scan, you're running through all the frequencies of 41,000 or 1.8 million hertz, and we'll cover this in greater detail if we do a Rife talk. When you're doing that, certain frequencies resonate with certain parasites, and unfortunately oftentimes there's like 5 different forms of a parasite, which means I'm picking up frequencies of different larval forms and eggs and adults, and it's a freak show. It's an absolute freak show. And I have to tell these people, look, there's a worm inside your liver that's causing you, and they get all freaked. I don't have any worms, you're wrong. And then when I kill it, they get into a detox. Okay, you were right. And so when you hit that frequency of that scan, it will resonate, and it will show up in the computer program, and then you run a reverse lookup to see what frequencies associated with that program, and it comes up, look, this is a major resonance, this is the parasite, and there's 1,000 of them. You know, all the time I get people coming in, diarrhea, constipation, intestinal problems, liver, non-functioning livers, insomnia, and a lot of the times there's a parasite involved in it. That's why I'm a big fan of Hulda Clark. And back in the day, I rejected it. But I wasn't, I was naive back in the day when I first started studying medicine. I've come 1,000 miles from where I was, and I really studied the hell out of these parasites and look at what they're doing to people, and I can kill them. The easiest thing and the best thing I do for people is to kill bad bacteria, viruses, parasites in the human body. And that may be one of the most traumatic recoveries that a person can have using Rife technology. One of the things I've done that's been phenomenal is to kill shingles virus, and for people that have decades-long infections, and when I kill it, the next day they're fine and they get freaked out. And we can get into further along that lines, I suppose.
I'm so interested. We'll do a whole, we're going to do more episodes. I mean, this episode here will be broken down, but I'm looking forward to doing one completely on the right machine and just how you use it. But is the frequency, it's the frequency that you're using to kill the virus, right? It's the frequency of the machine.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. This is just quickly, and we need to go over this again in another episode. But anyway, look, if I have a glass in my hand and you hit a high C note, it smashes. What you'll find is because it's a resonant frequency of the glass, it shakes the molecules and they just explode. Same thing happens with the parasite. It's got a resonant frequency, and it could be the DNA, it could be the cell membrane, it could be something with that parasite that destroys it. But you'll find it disintegrates. A couple of more things we should probably talk about for mercury before we go, because I've just researched the heck out of it over so many years and the environment. One of the studies that I've got to go over, that is one of the most definitive studies in the history of the human race, is when the scientists went up into Wyoming. They drilled a hole through the glacial core. They pulled it up and they looked at the mercury levels in this glacier core over time, basically ice, right? A glacier. And what they determined was the second biggest mercury input into the atmosphere was solely from California during the gold rush. Now, in the environment, there's a gold rush going on, but it's not in California. It's going on over the entire planet. It's because of the $2,000 an ounce or whatever it is gold. People are out there. You're looking at places like China, Philippines, Ecuador, Ghana, Cameroon, Sudan, Peru, not so much here, but actually in Cologne there's a little bit. But all over the world right now, people are burning mercury into the atmosphere. It's the number one source of mercury toxicity into the atmosphere. Well, look, we already have the data. It's there. The biggest mercury input into the atmosphere over the past 500 years has been from just the California gold rush, where 250,000 tons of mercury was used to amalgamate gold in a variety of processes. I won't get into it because it's sick and twisted, but one of them is panning for golden streams. But the bigger processes used more mercury and wasted more mercury. Now you're burning all those forests, which contained a lot of that mercury from the gold rush. You can still find it in the forest. It's going up into the atmosphere. So that is one of the things I've just got to say. The biggest source of mercury toxicity in the atmosphere was actually from the Industrial Revolution. Another graph that I'm big on, that I cover in the YouTube videos, you can see mercury going along in the Arctic wildlife. Mercury concentrations in Arctic wildlife from 1200 AD. How did I get that? Well, it's from teeth, hair samples, fur, feathers, whatever they could get, they analyzed for mercury, just like they do today in our hair. What they find is the mercury is just about the same until 1860 hits, and it goes like this to this and shoots straight up. And that is just from mercury from the California gold rush. So when we look at mercury input from artisanal mining, we're talking about most of the story here. Not only back then, but also today. Now, just keep in mind that nobody in California uses mercury amalgam. It stopped in the 70s. You know that. You're an LA woman, right? So, look, but right now, it doesn't matter about California, because mercury is being used in China. 5,000 tons a year easily being used in mercury amalgam panning for gold. In the Philippines, 500,000 people is working in the mining industry using mercury. It's the biggest mercury polluter into the atmosphere right now is the Philippines. And the biggest reason why they're doing it is they're not using the reclamation equipment that you could basically collect the used mercury and then recycle it in the process. And they just don't want to do that because it's expensive. So the biggest mercury input into the atmosphere right now from the two biggest sources, which are artisanal mining and coal burning, is coming from the same countries. The same countries that are burning coal, like China and Indonesia and India, are the same countries that are putting all the mercury into the atmosphere from using artisanal mining or amalgamating gold and then burning the mercury off. So all your den of iniquities, it's all in Asia. Sorry to all those people that probably angry.
So sad for the planet and the people and all the animals. God, I always feel sorry for the animals because they're not doing anything to participate in this horrible tragedy. But I have a question for you about minerals, because you were talking and you were just talking about, as one of the steps to heal from mercury toxicity is to replenish the minerals that you're low in. So basically, let me see if I have this right. So what you're recommending is people probably first start with sweating, because that's a good first step to initiate the body's own detoxification process. Then maybe as they start learning to sweat and they start doing that better, they can start adding their vitamins, their liposomal vitamin C and their liposomal glutathione, and then they start with a hair test, so they have a baseline. But now let's say they get the results of their hair test now, and they're going to take some minerals. Let's say like sodium and potassium are really high, calcium, magnesium's really low. Let's just say like that. So because I've had a lot of people on my show, and I love to advocate ionic minerals, because I had a guy who was really sick, and he now runs this ionic mineral company, and I had him on his show and learned his story. Now, how do you feel about those kind of minerals helping people out of imbalances, and if you're low or you need more of something, how do you feel about those kind of minerals?
Yeah, ionic trace minerals, absolutely, in that salt form are readily available to the body, and that's the type of form that exists in the body, like magnesium chloride. That's what I've researched years ago. Ionic, I think everybody who is going through the process of mineral deficiencies should look at taking an overall ionic trace mineral supplement regularly. And that is because that a lot of these supplements will have things like silica and selenium in them, and we're going to get into aluminum, and I promise you that's going to be every bit as riveting, not as complex. That's the good news. And it's a lot easier to detox from aluminum. We'll get into that. But I recommend that they take an ionic trace mineral supplement. It used to be colloids. It used to be colloidal mineral supplement, the Dr. Wallach.
Right.
I don't know if you've read his books. He's always talking about, it's like swirled like ice cream, and it comes from clays, and it's old plants, and it's this and that.
Right.
But the new idea is ionic trace minerals, because they're more available than the colloids, which is just basically a grouping of minerals together. It's more available to the cells. So yeah, I'm into that ionic trace mineral. And yeah, I think you should do that. Yes, I think you should supplement. Zinc is classic. You know this as much as or more than I do. Zinc is classically deficient in heavy metals because it's involved in the metallothionein in the kidney, and it gets bound. The magnesium is the other classic one that's deficient.
Selenium.
Because it's used for mercury chelation. So I recommend all those things that we talk about with the mineral, the selenium, the molybdenum. Take an ionic trace mineral, supplement that ion is low, and you'll find you'll kickstart the entire glutathione process, because when the body's missing something, it's like a car. Are you going to run a car if one of the pistons is missing? No, you ain't going to run. It's not going to run. But you put the piston in there, and whoop-de-doo, you're running down the road. Same thing with the human body. It's missing one of the parts to where it can run. It's not going to run. Yeah. And when you put that part in there, boy, it takes right off, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so, when you see something like in a hair test where, let's say, calcium is low, on the training that I did, when you have low calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium all low, those are our 4 life minerals. They literally they called that something like the death thing, because it's like they're all on the floor low. So when like for example, Lloyd, my partner, and I've tested him a lot, so I'm using him as an example. That's a mineral that went back in the day. I was doing regular minerals, like more rock minerals, not ionic minerals. This was many years when I first started the hair test, and he for sure has to be on his hair test. He was in this 4 low thing always, no matter how much he took, how good he ate, how much. The thing that brought him up a little was juicing, but still it was amazing to me for the diet that we ate, everything we were doing, how his minerals just stayed on the floor. And they would tell him, you need more calcium, but he literally, his body would just lock up. He would calcium was so bad. He needs it desperately, I believe, but he can't take it. You know what I mean? So I think this is where ionic, because like Dr. Wallach did colloidal, and I think it's just moved from that particle size to a kind of nanoparticle, which is more like ionic, which slides into the cells probably. That's probably a non-scientist way I can explain it.
No, that's about right.
but honestly, I think, minerals like calcium, when you take them in the rock form, now they know that like calcium can cause a lot of heart attacks in women. It has a lot of side effects in people. And this is why I think it can be better if we can do it with, minerals that either our plants have already pre-digested and then we're getting them. That's what's so good about a plant diet, is you're getting the plants to break down all those rock minerals, and then you eat the plants and you're getting the mineral you can absorb, because a lot of those other minerals you can't absorb, and many people have an absorption problem anyway. That's like gut problems. But just in general, like it made me think of that when you were talking about that. It's one thing to take selenium, but when you're low in a mineral like calcium, and then you have to take calcium, and calcium can be toxic and dangerous if you're, especially in women, they have a lot of problems. They stop recommending that. But so I just wondered your experience about that, if you have found success increasing their minerals in their hair test by doing a more absorbable form.
Yes, I have, but I think not enough. When you're taking, you will get MDs recommending. I had one client that was taking calcium because she was supposedly I don't even think they did a hair test, but the MD said, well, you're old, you're an old woman, you need to take calcium. So they give her this calcium. I don't remember the form, but you should not take a calcium carbonate. You should not take a calcium oxide, because it's very hard to assimilate into the body. You're totally right about the ionic trace minerals. They're way easier to assimilate into the body. Definitely not calcium oxide, definitely not calcium carbonate. A lot of people aren't going to be able to assimilate that. And remember, right now, the crazy thing that's going on all over the planet is people are getting a platinum hip put in. And they're, I had to get my other hip replaced. Well, I had to get my knees done. Well, I had my elbow replaced. Well, I'm going to have to get my shoulders. Well, look, I keep telling these people, I start yelling at them, look now, you can't just take calcium and expect, this whatever calcium to solve every problem you have with your bone disorders, with your arthritis and with your osteoporosis and all this other crazy stuff that people are getting into. It takes 10 minerals to make a bone. It's not just calcium. Silica is very important. And magnesium, you should never take calcium without taking magnesium, because magnesium makes calcium more soluble, not only in the body, but also in seawater. Do you know that seawater contains all of the minerals in a certain concentration that nearly is exact proportion of what's in the blood? This is because certain minerals in certain concentrations work well together. And you should never take calcium on its own. People that take calcium on their own, it's toxic. You have to take calcium in association with these other minerals if you want to strengthen your bones. Remineralizing the bones is a process of increasing collagen and increasing the minerals and in a certain proportion, and also getting rid of heavy metals. And so, it takes that 10 different minerals. So you can't just take calcium. You should take it in a whole supplement with all the other minerals, like ionic trace minerals. Take extra magnesium, because it makes the calcium more soluble, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So let's recap like the thing. So we're working on sweating. We're doing a hair test to make sure we know where we're starting, but they have to realize that doesn't mean much. It's more the pattern that you're following in a hair test every few months, depending on how it can be every month for some people, but depends what they can afford. And then you take your liposomal, glutathione, vitamin C, add some ionic trace minerals, but also, let's say you're low in magnesium or calcium, you could take those ionically too, whatever you're low in. And then you change your diet, you start like working on sleeping and sweating, and then you build up your antioxidants, and you just kind of slowly keep, I would say, add a homeopathy to help your kidneys learn to keep dumping, do some coffee enemas to help get some stuff out that doesn't recirculate. So do I have it right? Is there anything I'm missing other than probably the Rife machine?
Well, yeah. Just try to avoid the inflammatory foods, the high oxalate foods, the glutens, and get rid of the processed foods. I think you mentioned that. And then I can't stress this enough, always start out slow. So when you go into your sweat therapies, you're going to do it one time a week. you're going to see how you feel. Always listen to your body. It's one of my yoga instructors used to always tell me, always listen to your body. And so you should. If you start feeling bad, you back off the therapies. Give yourself a week or two off. So engage the sweat therapies. Don't increase anything more than 10% a week. So in the next time you're going to start off 20 minutes in the sauna, and then or 10 minutes in the sauna, and you start sweating more and more. How do you feel? You should feel okay. You should start to feel better. If you engage the liposomal glutathione, very small amounts. You take 1/10 of the recommended dose. How do you feel? What is the body telling you? Liposomal vitamin C, same thing. How are you feeling? And when you start changing your diet and you do all these things, you're going to have to realize that stuff is going to come out and you're going to start to feel terrible. And if that feeling terrible is interfering with your life, you've gone too far and you need to get back out. Remember, slow is the way to do it. Remember Andrew Cutler talking about, well, it takes a whole year to get rid of the mercury using, the video you did with them, the podcast you did of 300 milligrams, start out with 25 milligrams of alpha lipoic acid, and it's every 3 hours. And you ask him, how long does it take? He said a year. Well, it's going to take at least that any other way, but you're probably not going to experience as much as redistribution of the mercury. That has been my experience over the past four years. I think I've been doing detox myself and detoxing other people, and it's worked very well. So yeah, you have it down. That's the thing, the diet, reduce the inflammation, add anti-inflammatory foods. If you want to see what an anti-inflammatory food is, take a look at the anti-cancer diets. They're full of anti-inflammatory food.
I preach to people eat a clean, all organic, non-GMO, totally vegan, low fat as possible, and just healthy, clean as much as you can. And if people, the sicker you are, the cleaner your diet has to be. That's why a Gerson person that's in stage 4 cancer, they're doing 13 juices a day and they're doing 5 coffee enemas, and that's because they're sick. And you got to do something extreme when you're that sick and you don't have a lot of time on your side. But in detoxing, you can't go fast. It's only going to make you sicker. It's always important. I think that's good advice that you said. Just start slow. In my experience, anybody who's had a cancer, usually they can't sweat. It's very common to see a cancer person not be able to sweat. So I love that you start there, because I think that's an important thing, is to teach the body how to sweat again, because it's amazing how many people can't sweat.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. You've definitely got it going on. That's the way to do it. Yeah. I totally agree with all of that.
So that's
cool.
It's
what a ride. What a ride, huh?
Yeah, what a ride. And it's a good journey. Like for me, I was so sick, and I knew that if I didn't fix myself, I wasn't going to make it. It's just the way it is. You have to learn it yourself. So it's cool that you did that, and now you're helping a lot of other people in the world. That's fantastic. That's always the best way. And I look forward. We'll do a podcast on aluminum for sure. I really want to hear that one. I'm very, very excited to do that. And then we'll do another one on the Rife machine. So we'll definitely be in touch.
Okay, super. Thanks very much. It's been a real blast. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. So hang tight for a minute, okay?
Okay, sure.